And welcome to another episode of G220 Radio. This is episode number 399, and we are talking about MLMs and the Christian life. MLMs being multi-level marketing. We've got a full list of all the guys from G220 Radio here tonight, and a special guest as well. We have the original Natty P with us tonight. Nathaniel, how you doing, brother? I think Nathaniel is...
Sorry, I had to empower my microphone. It was muted. I am roaring and ready to go to work this G220 radio system. The best part about it is it's all word of mouth, so I'm excited.
Is it word of mouth or word of faith?
Mouth. Because your words have power.
Okay.
And as you heard there, that is George Alvarado. He's with us tonight. George, how we doing, brother?
Good. I am looking forward to speaking this show into existence tonight.
Everybody's got jokes already, so this should be a fun, interesting show. And then we have Mike Miller. Brother, how you doing? And introduce us to our special guest tonight.
So I'm doing fine, and I don't have lasers coming out of my eyes. They just go in, and next to me is my wife.
Hi.
Hi. You're gonna introduce her name, or who is this? Who is this young lady? That's
wife of Mike Miller.
All look bad right now.
The wife of Mike Miller. Duh.
Biblical way of introducing her.
Yeah. I know.
I don't get a name. Just the wife.
I can already see this is going to be a really good program here tonight. You're going to have a lot of fun with this, But at the same time, it's a serious topic we want to discuss. Next week is episode number 400. 400 episodes. You're going to want to tune in to G220 Radio next week, October 8th. We are going to be talking about the essentials of the faith, and throughout the show, we're going to also talk about our favorite episodes of G220 Radio. Nathaniel's got a lot of listening to do to catch up to all 400 episodes. So,
then he's off probation.
Just vote for this one.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, you're going to want to check that out. Go ahead, Mike. You were going to say something?
No, I just realized I forgot to change the title on Facebook.
Oh man. Listen, all you got to do is think about the title, and it'll organize itself.
Is that how that works?
Just think positive thoughts about it.
Just think positive thoughts, man.
All right, so we're going to talk about MLMs. Somebody's got to keep it in line. All right, so we're going to talk about MLMs tonight, and we're going to discuss this topic, multi-level marketing. This is a topic that was brought to the table for G220 to talk about, and my experience with MLMs, I don't really have much experience with them other than when I was growing up, my mom would go to the Avon or Mary Kay or Tupperware parties and things like that of that nature. I remember seeing those Avon catalogs come in the mail. But that's about all I have experience in when it comes to these multi-level marketing companies. So, Mike, maybe you want to tell us what is a market level
multi-level?
Marketing? Yeah, multi-level marketing.
So multi-level marketing is also known as direct sales or network marketing. They kind of go with all three of them. Many people might say they're pyramid schemes, but just to be knowing, technically, according to the Federal Trade Commission, they're not pyramid schemes. But what they basically are is that you are your own business owner and you try to sell this product, but at the same time, you're trying to recruit other people to sell the product also and to try to continue to grow your business in that way. Most of them will get, if the people you're recruiting also sells, you get parts of those sales. And you mentioned some, you have Avon, Mary Kay. I mean, Amway is probably the largest and most known. It's been around for a while. Beachbody, Norwex, Prime America Financial Services, come to find out, is it? That was a shock to me. Just with some relationships I have in that realm. And
LuLaRoe, 31.
Yep, 31 bags. And what's interesting
Now,
with
real,
some of
real
this,
quick
Yep.
with that, the 31, because I heard about this one too. It's a Christian one, right? This is like
So is Mary Kay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mary Kay is too. Okay,
Mhm.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
doTERRA, there's a lot of other religious ones like doTERRA, of course, Young Living, which are oil-based companies. I think is it doTERRA that's Mormon, I believe.
maybe.
I don't know.
One of the two, Young Living or doTERRA. I have to look at it. I'll look it up while you guys talk. Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, so you have a lot of them covering different ranges of topics of sales and services. And that's kind of primarily now you see MLMs is in this, selling distribution aspect. And just for the show, we're not going to talk about, are MLMs pyramid schemes? Are they not? What is the other laws behind it? What are some of the, the products? We won't critique kind of the quality of products, though some do offer very good products and services with it. And there's a lot of other things, the history and other things that we could cover. And in fact, there's an entire podcast called The Dream, which I would recommend with caveats. They're not conservative in any way, whether religious or political, just to give you out. There is some language in the beginning of the podcast too with it. But there's a lot to these and the history and the development. And one thing we thought was interesting was its connection to Vincent Peale. Make sure I get that right. Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. This is also closely related to the prosperity gospel. So you have those two connections there very early on within it. And you see the language repeated over and over again in that way. But also in the line of recruitment, you have training to get what they call soft targets, which are usually family and friends. Now, if you're a Christian woman or man in a church settings, look at all these soft topics. And so there's been problems with that also. And I think those two areas are probably more where we can adequately address them. Maybe Nathaniel, being a former law student, can get in some of the business laws and whatever that deals with. But for the show, I think more concerning than kind of the rest of it is this connection with the power of positive thinking, prosperity gospel, a denial of God's sovereignty within those understanding, and also how this can change the dynamics within a church and has changed dynamics within a church because of people selling these products and trying to recruit people to join their business.
Mike, I don't know if anybody else doesn't have anything, I'm actually quite interested to jump maybe into that first. I'd like to be able to personally go into the origins and roots of some of this thinking, which are obviously religiously based, and maybe even some of the things that they say that sound historically linked with New Thought metaphysics, which were, of course, the prosperity gospel and word of faith movement come from. But that last thing you just said, I want to be able to, at least me personally, I want to hear right now. I'd like to be able to, I'd be interested in hearing what is the way it's changed some of our churches so that people could get the immediate context before we start going into maybe some of the history.
So, yeah, I think part of it is this comes off of the Dream podcast. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but they had a caller call in, and she was a woman. So I don't know the theology position of the church, but she was a youth leader. And that moms would contact her to set up an appointment saying they want to talk about their child. And like 5 minutes into the conversation, it switches to this selling products. That's the whole reason they wanted the appointment. You hear about other women within a church that would try to recruit other church members And if they said no or rejected them in some other way, they basically would stop fellowshipping with them. They would push him away. And, and if it was enough, they would just go to a different church and find it. So you have these different ways. And part of it is that your church members now become, and in their training, objects to recruit, people to recruit, to come underneath you. And they become now the product towards the means towards your end, and kind of a product to receive with it. So that changes how I, as a church member, starts thinking about these other people. If I'm trying to grow my business, which is primarily recruiting, and that's where I'm going to make my money, not making my money on my sales. I'm making money on recruiting people who will make their sales, and recruit people and make their sales.
What's me and my wife were talking about this as I was getting ready for this program here tonight, and she was telling me that in her previous church before we were married, they had I think we mentioned the 31 with the bags. And she said it would go around throughout the church, and everyone was interested in being on top of having the new bag. Like they were purchasing this because they wanted to keep up with everybody else in the church that was a part of this group. And my wife with 5 kids and not able to kind of afford those types of things, it's hard for those people who maybe don't have the money or can't really get involved with that. And like you said, Mike, it can maybe damage or cause some disfellowship, between people because they're not a part of this thing.
And like Mikey said, they become profit, right? Not persons. Yeah. And after a while, that does damage maybe some fellowship. If people aren't doing it cautiously, of course, I'm sure there's people that are out there that maybe work for some of these businesses or in churches and they're causing issues.
Right.
But that is a real temptation, no doubt. I can imagine what that looks like. I know some friends who sell Pampered Chef, which is also MLM. I'll just say MLM. doTERRA, Young Life, and some of them are successful. And they're good believers as far as like reputation goes. They're not causing troubles. They work hard. They're doing really well. They're very successful in that area of work. But even some of them, you can tell can be affected by even some of the religious connotations that some of these rallies that they go to, these conferences that they go to, where they try to encourage and empower and persuade to continue to buy and sell more or get more people underneath you. And of course, we could talk about it a little bit later, but I can see some of that influence, especially when you're trying to talk to them about maybe just the business aspect as a whole. Some of them would find it very difficult maybe to incorporate some aspects of Christian principles, maybe like humility or the fact that people aren't profit, or maybe the fact that, if God doesn't grow my business, it's not because I'm a failure, but because it's God's sovereignty that he hasn't allowed me to grow my business, not because I'm a failure, which one of the tenets is if your business doesn't grow, it's your fault. And no blame is laid on the industry or the corporation or the people who are teaching you. It's all your fault if you're not busy enough, if you're not giving the organization enough time, or it's because you're not thinking positively, or in your mind you've already lost. And I know we're going into more aspects of it, but these are some of the things that you could probably think of that are real temptations for people within this organization if they're not thinking biblically. And of course, that's very dangerous and disastrous. And we see some parallels between that and, of course, word faith and prosperity types of teaching.
Yeah. And you should know, Randy Elkhorn earlier this year wrote an article about MLMs and actually cited a church who wrote in their bylaws that you cannot promote MLMs within the church because it was causing too much of a problem. Now, to be fair, it doesn't have to cause the problem,
right?
Mm-hmm.
To be part of it. Like, obviously, it's a business. If you want to do it, I think this is concerning. You have to check yourself on, but you don't have to act in that way. But the trade-off then is, and you kind of mentioned, is, well, then you're probably not going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to, is there a way to balance those? And that, I think, is going to be the difficult aspect with it. for it.
I mean, that's really the problem, is the business model encourages you to look at your brothers and sisters in Christ as business opportunities, as dollar signs. Because, I mean, you could own a business and be a legitimate sales agent for something else and be in a church and not have the same problem because you're just selling a product. But within the structure, the business structure of an MLM, you really can't make money just selling the product, because they require you to buy a certain amount of product to stay a seller, or they require you to pay some sort of fees or dues to be a seller. And so really, yeah. And the only way you can significantly earn money is by recruiting other people to be in your downline, which is basically your pyramid.
Yeah.
And so there's no legitimate way, because all those people you recruit, the only way they're going to earn money is by building their pyramid, by, building their downline. So literally the business structure is very dangerous to Christians. It trains you to look at people as just business opportunities without concern for their welfare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think go ahead, Mike or Rick.
No, I was going to say we got a comment in the Facebook live chat from Mike King, and he said he's out by your way there, George. He said, if I understand the definition of an MLM, I have a negative perspective on MLMs. Several years ago, I had two different Christians in two different churches become my best friends until I told them I didn't want to do Amway, and never heard from them again.
Yeah, and those are the horror stories obviously we hear about. Obviously, there are some other believers that can accept rejection and not take it personally. I think everything you guys are bringing up is important when it comes to making the distinction, right, between people who can handle it and people who can't. I think if you're one of those people who are starting to see people this way and are treating these people this way, it's very, very important that you probably should stop. It's probably not be a good business for you, since you don't know how to balance between personal relationships and profit.
Yeah, I think that's, obviously the concern we want to bring up, which doing the research, this is kind of more known in the broader, like people complain about this. Obviously, we're doing a show on it. You hear people who have left MLMs talk about this is kind of what they acted this way. There was one story, and they didn't give much about it, but this lady chose not to be a bridesmaid in her friend's wedding to go to a conference so that she can increase her business. And so you have these, the stories in this, because that plays into it. There is that necessary fact. And so we might not say, joining an MLM is, evil or sin necessarily, but these are some serious things a serious thing, and what we'll talk about later, you have to consider that you just can't go waltzing in this and not be aware of how this will affect your church life, how you affect these things. And especially if you have someone who is seen well upon in a church and doing this and pushing this with it, there's devastating effects that can happen and is just there. Now, could they? No. But I think with a sinful nature and not being careful, they would progress in that way.
I was listening to that episode because, Mike, you recommended that podcast, and I went and listened to those to get some more information on it as well. And I remember hearing that, and it was sad because she wasn't doing well in the company as far as making the money that she thought she was going to make. And they're pushing, come to these conferences, come to these things to kind of, that's going to give you the moving up to this next level. It's always a moving up to the next level type thing. And you're putting in all this money. I remember hearing on one of those episodes, a lady said she was like $25,000 already into it. And so a lot of it comes out of your own pocket because you end up buying your own products because you want to stay in a certain, demographic within the company.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some concerns about being wise with your finances. There are lots of stories of people that have come out of MLMs in some very serious debt debt that their spouses didn't know about and caused some serious trouble for their marriage as well. And it's built into their structure. Like, for instance, with the girl going to the conference, she's got to pay her own way to the conference. And as part of this whole power of positive thinking, if they say, well, my business isn't doing well, they'll say, well, are you committing to going to the conferences? Because that'll change your life. And so they put in the money to go to the conference. They pay for the ticket. They pay for the hotel room. And then, they get there and they may or may not get anything actually helpful out of it. There's, I think, some serious considerations that have to be made there. If you've got to buy your own stock before selling it, the markdowns are not significant in MLMs, just from a business model perspective. It's not like normal sales. So there's a lot that needs to be considered. If you're in an MLM or if you're looking into entering one, I would advise to be very careful with your finances.
And they also encourage you to lie to your spouse about opening like a credit card for your MLM. And most people who do it don't keep track financially. So some of them don't even know how much they've actually lost, or if they're breaking even until it's too late with it. So again, there's, kind of moving into maybe the next part of the show with that there is that push to make money. And what I think the Dream does very good of is showing that these are people, ordinary people, trying to not necessarily have the car or have the trip to the Bahamas. They're just trying to, get out of debt. They're just trying to help, their husband out.
Yeah.
Or pay for medical bills, and just to do it. Like, they're not in it for all the extravagancies that are promoted. They're in it just to have just a little bit better life, that they don't feel like they're scraping or that, in that way. And I think that's, the draw with it. And so, do you have something, Ricky? Sorry.
I was going to wait till you finished.
Oh,
so was I. My turn.
So when you get into these, and then you add on top of that guilt of, well, you need to think positive thoughts. You need to think about you're succeeding. This is from earlier this year at a Beachbody conference. And like the things so this is a trap people have, that the lady says, how many of you have ever said to yourself, I can't be successful, fulfilled, happier until, I achieve a certain income level. But it's like, well, success is every single step of the way that you go there. That's like your success with it. And there's that continual idea. I listened to one guy for 20 minutes talk about how you just need to think positive thoughts, get rid of the negative thoughts, think the positive thoughts that, okay, I can make my goal. I can make that next rank. And as long as you think those positive thoughts, you'll get there.
Yeah. And in contrast to the prosperity gospel, where it's that top individual, it's like the Benny Hinn's or the Creflo Dollars, the TD Jakes. These guys are wealthy. They make lots of money, and they're getting it from these people inside their churches that are giving them money, just like in these types of MLMs. The people at the bottom are trying to get to that top. And then when you fail to do it, as it was mentioned in the beginning of the program, when you fail to do it, it's your fault. You don't have enough faith. You don't have enough positive thinking to get you through that, and it falls back on you. And that's for a spiritual aspect of things, that puts a lot of burden, puts a yoke upon people that they can't get out of themselves, because they're trusting in what this person's teaching them and leading them, rather than putting their faith and trust in Christ and then the sovereignty of God working things out in their life, giving them what they need, maybe not more of an abundance, but giving them what they need in life.
Yeah. That.
I was going to mirror that as well. And I think one of the things that's concerning to me is I had a particular relative who got involved in a insurance MLM and was selling insurance in the same fashion. and thankfully I can't remember their name right now because I would throw them under the bus. They would say similar things to this relative, and hearing her talk was really frustrating because as you heard her say things, you knew this wasn't coming from her. You knew there was a lot of that promise, envisioning your success. There was a lot of that promise giving that you're going to get rich, and that if you just fulfill these steps, you pay this amount of money, you work this hard, you're going to be able to be out of your debt, out of poverty. And the only thing it did is kept her poor, because as she continued to give, as she continued to be more involved, and she tried to pass some certification, which she wasn't able to pass. It's not her fault in a sense, but still continued to put money into the company. And then going to these conferences, there was still no income. And she was essentially working for this company without this certification in which she can make some kind of revenue. And it wasn't coming her way because she couldn't pass the certification. And even then, you still need to have people. You still need to make sales. You still need to do all that stuff that every MLM requires, right? And what's funny is that Kevin Hart was at one of those conferences, and he was the sort of the face in which to encourage people to be successful, right? You want to be like Kevin Hart. You want to be successful like Kevin Hart. You want to have money like Kevin Hart. And then most of the time, these MLMs, they do that, right? They start to sell concepts and people. They're not actually selling the product sometimes, right? People believe in the concept of getting rich, or, the people that they're representing, the people that are representing the company. And that's another thing about MLMs that's very deceptive, is that you start to put these people forward who can, sponsor your company, and you can be successful like them. You can have money like them. You don't have to be poor like them. But once again, it's a vicious cycle. Very few people are going to find success in MLMs. From what I understand, there is a lot of people who have had much more failure in MLMs than they actually have had success, the average everyday person, right? The only ones that are truly successful oftentimes are going to be people who forsake family, friends, time, other jobs, living in tents. Like, they're going to have those quote unquote success stories, right? That everybody talks about. They never quit. They never gave up. Why? Because the company told them not to, not realizing that they were running themselves ragged, running themselves impoverished, and stayed in poverty until quote unquote they hit it big. Sounds more like gambling than it does actually working. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get to even have that kind of success, because regardless of those success stories that get to influence others to keep on going, it's just like making it out of the hood to be a rapper or to be a basketball player. You have better success of getting out of the hood during the military, okay, than you do becoming a rapper or being a basketball player. That's just the way it is. The business is very competitive. There's a lot of other places where it's competitive too in life. That's just the way life is. It's very competitive in a lot of areas. I think they don't present a realistic outlook in their own company, because if they did, most people wouldn't even join the concept.
Ricky, you have something?
No, I was just moving somebody out of our YouTube chat. If you'd like to leave a comment or leave us a thought on this topic that we're talking about today, feel free to do it. Please make sure it's relevant to the program. If it's not, you will get dismissed.
Dismissed. Nice word.
And to elaborate more on George's point, so the statistics the Dream puts out from surveys they've gathered is 99% of the people who join an MLM will fail. They will not make the money. That's a really high amount. And I was listening to Dave Ramsey talk about, no, not Dave. I'm messing up. Anyways, the cut your credit card guy. And
I think that's Dave Ramsey, no? I'll do the research, Mike. You keep talking.
Yeah. He was mentioning that, like, the success stories you have, like, they always point him off as like, I'm a teacher and I made it big. And he was commenting, like, in reality, they're not teachers anymore. Like, if you're going to make money, you have to do this full time and put the effort into it, which is not bad. Like, that's how you are to do it. It's when you start diving into this, think powerful, think positive thoughts, you think like as if you already got it and it will come. If you, as one guy said, I think Like every time I go fly an airplane that I think I'm going to get in first class and I get in first class. Like he makes it sound like that's how it happens all the time.
I wish that were so true, man. I'm tired.
I know. I keep thinking about when I was in the military going first class and they never gave it to me. So, you know, I mean, obviously,
well, if he was in the army, they'd bump you up there when you're coming back from like. Never mind, man. Just playing.
Yeah.
So
I don't think the Army likes to fly in planes, right? I think
they keep jumping out of them.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I can add just a little bit of perspective on the gender influence, I don't have a statistic for this, but I know that a very large proportion of MLMs are targeted at women. You guys will probably hear us say, you know, she did this woman did that. Lots of the stories are about women. And I think there is some significance to that. And I think that I have seen so much of MLMs since moving to a seminary town because they target that stay-at-home mom, the pastor's wife that is taking care of children, and for very good intentions wants to be a wonderful helpmeet, wants to help, you know, provide income for their family without having to leave their children. And I think that makes them an easy target for MLMs. And I think it's even more dangerous when you have an elder's wife that's in an MLM because of the position that their spouse holds. And I know in the seminary world, I've seen more MLMs than I can count. And that's, I mean, I have friends in the seminary that are moms that are in it for good reasons. They want to help their spouses, but it's very dangerous. I think a lot of jobs come with dangers. Owning your own business comes with financial dangers too. But this one, the business model itself is particularly prone to that. I can tell you that when I was approached with an MLM as a business opportunity, it was because I just had my second child and they took advantage of the fact that they knew I would be hating having to return to work. And they thought that would make me easy prey for this business opportunity.
It's funny that you say stuff like that because what's the parallels? We're talking about prosperity gospel. We're talking about faith healing, right? What's the demographic for those? People who are poor, people who are unhealthy, right? And we have to get theological with this. The nature of man is to want to do some kind or have some kind of control in their life. And one of the things that New Thought, metaphysics, which this all branches from, especially when you talk about envisioning and positive thinking, unlocking potential, the subconscious, the imagination, that kind of thing. And then, of course, accepting full responsibility when it's something that doesn't go right. It's our fault. We can't have that kind of culpability. All that comes from New Thought metaphysics, and where it started from was healing, where in the mind you can envision being healthy or claim in your mind being healthy. And if you can unlock that potential, you would be healthy. And it moved away from that to economic success. And then now you have what you have today is the amalgamation of the disgusting prosperity word, faith, gospel. And it targets these kinds of people because this is what they want. And in their nature, not only would they like to control their own destiny, but as just a human level, who doesn't want to be healed? Who doesn't want to have a better life and money to be able to solve your issues and your problems in life? Nobody wants any of that stuff. So of course, unlock your faith, like Ricky talked about earlier, tapping into the divine, right? God, right? From whom all blessings flow. We can pervert all of the gospel that we want to in that, but there's so much that they parallel from the New Thought metaphysics into the gospel prosperity. They just give it Christianese words. They say they do the exact same things. When you hear Paula White talk, you can hear her saying the same thing. Like he said, Benny Hinn, Joyce Meyer, Joel Osteen, right? Stephen Furtick. You hear all these people saying the exact same things, and no wonder it's so attractive now within quote unquote evangelicalism, because that's predominantly what you see in TV and everything else in the world. So multi-level marketing, it's like a breeding ground because you have the lingo. It's believable. And unfortunately now what we know as capitalism is all mixed into it, when capitalism, really, like free markets and free societies and having private businesses and having salaries and being able to have benefits from the businesses, like medical and dental and all those other things, is nothing like multi-level marketing. But now it's been mixed into that. And then what? Now you have lucrative business corporations taking advantage of people who are poor, giving whatever money they can, and they're the ones benefiting, unfortunately. And it doesn't mean we take their money and spread the wealth. I'm not directing that to socialism. That's not solution either. But it gets mixed into capitalism, and then people who view capitalism see multi-level marketing and they think it's the same thing, and it's not. And unfortunately, it's a huge conglomerated mess. And the only thing that really can undo this huge knot is the sword of the gospel. Just cut it right down the middle.
Well, it's like you said there, George. The in regular business, or in business, dealing with capitalism, there's an employer that's got a product or something that he's employing, or bringing in people as his employees to sell his product or whatever his business is, and he's working hard for that, and they're going to make a salary. They're going to get a pay. In the MLMs, if you don't make a lot of money, again, it comes back to then putting that burden upon you. Well, the reason you're not is because you're not making this money. Because if you was making, who wouldn't want to make $5,000 or more a month, right? Or 10,000. You see some of these people, that are making big money, because then you'd think you wouldn't have to worry about having your employer give you health benefits or insurance. You're making $10,000, $20,000 a month, all this money throughout the year. You can afford your own insurance. But it puts that burden upon the employee or the person that's trying to get to that level. And again, it goes back to, like you said, understanding the gospel, understanding that God gives us every good gift from above. He gives us all of our needs. Sometimes it's not what we think we want. Sometimes it's not what we think we need, but He gives it to us for our own benefit. Sometimes when we're struggling, it's for us to think about, what is it maybe that I could do differently, and how can I lean upon Christ in this? How can I lean upon God on
that? I don't think that a lot of this type of thinking is necessarily limited to multi-level marketing either. Like a lot of small business owners, I think, would be hit with the same kinds of assumptions, like if my business isn't succeeding, and so it must be me. Like a lot of times, if you're not working hard, obviously, if you're not putting the hours, it's not going to pay off, because that's how the world works. But if you're putting in all these hours, you're laboring really hard, you got a good business plan, and it just doesn't seem to pan out the way it should. Like sometimes George mentioned it earlier in the show, that God's sovereign over that too. Like sometimes if God wanted us to be an abundantly wealthy person, he would help us with all the various opportunities and stuff. So I think sometimes this kinds of thinking creeps in even with regular business owners.
Yeah. I think laziness too. I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead. I was going to say something about laziness.
No, I think, obviously we're not saying this is exclusive to MLM specifically, that anyone running a business can fall in these types of traps. Although if you're opening like a brick and mortar store up, there's a lot more into it, like with location and how those things are and adjusting. But I think one thing to kind of bring in mind is James 4:13 into thinking all of this. And James says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist, that vapor of a little time and then vanish. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. I think when you think about the training they go through, it's not, they'll say, trust the product, trust the process, trust all this. If it's not doing it, it's you. But I think what James here helps us to correct is that it's ultimately the Lord. If my business is going to succeed, it's because the Lord is behind it. And then, I need to make the right choices, do the right things, and live with integrity, which means not seeing, my church member as potential dollars to be made, but to see them as it. And if the Lord works to grow your business, and then praise him, but also be spiritually aware when the Lord is not letting you progress.
It's not like Job, lost all his cattle and all of his children died because he had a bad business plan and didn't have enough faith in his product.
Yeah.
The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something to be said about laziness, right? I think everybody can agree that the Bible talks much about the topic, especially in Proverbs. But I think this system, even if you were not lazy, as we already talked about, 99%, that's a huge number. There's a lot of people who aren't lazy and want to make some money, right? And they're going to find themselves spinning their own wheels and get burned out, and then realize that they didn't move up the ladder as fast as they could. Maybe they, quote unquote, made some mistakes along the way, right? Nobody's coaching them, maybe. Nobody's giving them the right nurturing that they need, mentorship that they need. That was the kind of business that my relative was in. Nobody was showing her anything. But meanwhile, she's given the money, right? And she's still working for them, even though they're not giving back, it seems at the time. They took advantage of her. And yes, she was a mother typically at home while her husband worked, which is really interesting that you say that, because now I'm thinking about all the people I've ran into and how many of them were male. There's very few that were male, but there were a lot of females. Yeah, a lot of females.
Target women.
And then you think about the economic status they're in, and that even more surprising, or maybe even the relational demographic or social demographic they find themselves in, whether they're married or not, or at home or not, or whatever the case may be. And it's not surprising the predictability, I guess, of that. Mikey, I just want to say it was Dave Ramsey, so good job. And last thing I was going to say was Proverbs 30, verse 7. 2 things I ask of you, deny them not to me before I die. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. That is one of my constant prayers in life, is to be content. And if I have an opportunity to make more money, I pray that more money, more problems doesn't come behind it. I always ask the question, am I going to make more money? But how much problems am I going to have now that I'm going to make more money? Because nothing comes that free if I'm going to make more money. People at work talk about all the time, you want to make 6 digits after you get out of the military? No, I don't, because I know what it's going to cost my family. And I think people need to realize we need to be praying that God will give us what's needful for us and be content with what we have. And if there's a way we can make more money, if there's a way in which we can have a better life and even some prosperity, I pray that, when God gives it to us, we would be praying this prayer as well as other prayers that keep us in check and don't put our money in uncertain riches, as the Bible says, because they fly away in an instant. And Ecclesiastes talks about how all of this is hevel, or fleeting is another way of saying it. And it vanishes away and it disappears and it goes into one hand and then goes to another very, very rapidly. So let's view riches and money for what it's worth in comparison to the eternal weight of glory. Those things are but dung in comparison to Christ.
I think it's a really great point to really meditate upon is the fact of being content. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of this lady who was in the first church where I was growing up in that church. And then when I truly got saved, I went back to that church and served there for 5 years. This little old lady who was very faithful to the Lord, loved the Lord, was always involved, serving every aspect that she could, even despite her age, always serving. And I remember her saying one time, she said, I wouldn't want to be a millionaire, because if God gave me $1 million, I would do something that would dishonor him. Because she was she had a house, but she wasn't living, like richly, she didn't have all this financial gain, but it's a matter of being content. And so you gotta ask yourself sometimes is, again, not everybody's in it for those reasons. We've had that, said earlier, even listening to that podcast that Mike recommended, there was many people that were doing it just to help out their spouse. just to help out a family member. Their motives were pure in it. And then they were struggling and spending more money trying to achieve something to help out their spouse. I remember in one of those shows, one of the ladies said, as I was mentioning about $25,000, she said her husband, she didn't even want to tell her husband now that she did that. I told my wife, I said, if you spent $25,000, I would know. Like that's not something that, would go unnoticed, but, just because of that guilt, that burden that comes down upon you, it can sever some problem. Because what does financial problems do in a marriage? It can cause problems. So you may be a Christian couple, you're trying to help out your spouse, and then you go and think you're going to help him and spend out $25,000, and now you've got unbelievable debt, and it can cause a fraction between your relationship in the marriage. So we got to look at what is the motive behind it. Proverbs 22:1 says a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. And so that was KJV because I couldn't grab my ESV. It's too far back.
You can't be grabbing all these other versions, man. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. And I think, that temptation there also, what are you going to worship? Are you going to worship money? Or are you going to worship God? And I think, we kind of mentioned it with it. There is that greed, in it. And that can become part of it. Not saying that Christian women who are involved with multi-level marketing businesses are necessarily filled with greed with it. But there is also some envy to see that person walk out on the stage saying they're, such a level and they're the top coach or whatnot. And you're like, I want to be like that. I want to be that person and not have to rug it. So now another spiritual component is this kind of envy of the people above you and making money, not realizing that, the bottom people in the pyramid don't make money. And there's going to become a point in which there's no one else that wants to do it and you're stuck.
I think that's why we see a lot, because me and my wife was talking about this too, and maybe you guys know more on this or not, but it used to be, as I was mentioning before, like I knew about the Avon, the Mary Kay, these parties that my mom would go to. Somebody would invite her to some Tupperware party. But now a lot of it has come online because in your area, you may run out of people to reach. So now you're getting it online. And one of the reasons why I brought up that scripture and was, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, is because then when people start to reach out to you online, as you put this in the show notes, Mike, you get a response or somebody sends you a message from an old classmate you haven't seen in years, or a friend from another church that you hadn't talked to in a while, or somebody from an old army buddy, or woman, since it does kind of go more towards women, not that there aren't men obviously in it, but and you think, oh man, hey, how are you? And they say, how you doing? And then it turns right to, hey, I got this business proposal I'd like to share with you. And then it feels disingenuous, and not everybody does that, because we actually do have some friends online that do it, and they don't come off that way. They never try to sell it to us, but there are those ones that my wife gets where people will send her a message, they'll say hi, and then they'll turn right into, hey, I got a product I'd like to sell you, or become a part of this, and it's like, it just feels kind of disingenuous. Like, do you really want to see how I'm doing, or do you just want to sell me something?
So I went halfway through Beachbody's coach training because I was trying to figure out where the money comes from. And it took me, I don't know how many weeks to figure it out. Cause like you said, George, it is a tangled mess trying to figure out the business plan. But that's really funny that you said that, Ricky, because they will give you scripts to send over Messenger and Instagram and whatnot. And they call them "Hey girl" messages. So now every time I get anything that says "Hey girl" and I don't know this person on a daily basis, I'm like, oh no.
So what you're saying is, when we inbox you about anything, just don't say "Hey girl." You're gonna delete it.
Just do #boss babe. That's
oh no, boss babes. Oh,
did you say boss babes?
It's a thing. It's a white girl thing. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah.
White or not, it's definitely funny.
It comes from MLMs.
It does.
They have this tag that you put on, I've seen it through a couple different people I know on Facebook and Instagram with it. Yeah, and it's this
because they work for themselves. They think they're a boss.
They're boss babes.
I mean, they are, I guess, if they have a team underneath them, but boss babes?
Yeah. So
yeah.
It's not a bad hashtag. It's just funny. It's funny to hear you say that to your wife on live Facebook. That to me is the funny part.
You know.
So, and I know that, you know, we're kind of, I guess we still got like 10 minutes left in the show, but I wish I could, I don't remember, but there is this, like, we've kind of been kind of saying it, but the fact is that MLM started, and when they started, they are taking the power of positive thinking from Vincent Peale. The one guy, he started Holiday Magic. This thing is a train wreck. William Penpatrick. I'm not going to tell you the stories, although they're funny.
Yeah.
You know, he's saying the same things that Peale is saying, in the same way. And he's kind of seen as the start of MLMs, or at least in the popularity. Reason why we have a lot about him is because he got caught and arrested for some different things. But they have clips of him, and he's saying the same thing that they're saying today. Like they're not even changing the language or the script. It is verbatim what is being taught with it. So now, understanding Peale was a Christian minister, so you have this connection now with Christianity, and with it, I think Utah has the highest amount of headquarters of multi-level marketing companies. Obviously, this could appeal a lot to Mormons, since the women tend to stay at home for most in it. You don't have a lot of Mormon women working outside the home with it. So, I mean, and part of this comes up to when Peter is writing to Timothy in 2 Timothy about how false teachers slip into women's homes. And he mentions Jambus and Jamsbury, which are what the tradition has as the two musicians that fought against Moses in Egypt. And you have this kind of similar working in it that they don't really want to tell you until you get involved what the business structure is like, that you have these two legs or these two pillars, or, you know, the other ways that they mention how they get their money.
Cash funnel.
Well, and the other thing is, I know we've mentioned before.
What did you say?
Cash
funnel.
Funnel.
What's that?
Like
I'll draw a picture of a cash funnel for you.
It's an upside down pyramid.
It looks like this. Can you see? That's a cash funnel.
Looks like a Dorito, bro. Maybe because I'm hungry. Or that's Illuminati confirmed. One of the two. I don't know.
So, Doritos are a great chip, and so this is a great business opportunity.
The delivery was smooth, man. The delivery was smooth.
So, but yeah, and I think, you know, when we think about it, these are all concerns that one should consider when they're going into or thinking about this, let alone all the other kind of negativity that people have in it. So while we're not saying it's a pyramid scheme here, it looks like a pyramid scheme, and that should be considered, and that there are problems related with the scheme. I think Lella Rue is getting in trouble for things they've done. They're a multi-level marketing business, and
you almost said scheme.
I know I did. I've been trying to work hard not to say scheme.
Why? Because it's not legally a scheme, but it is.
Yeah.
So whatever.
And just, you know, they're not paying their people, and how they did all their business transactions and like with it. And so these businesses are sketchy, and don't provide protection. And one way, like Young Living and some of the essential oil companies, you'll see people come on, oh, if you take these oils, like you'll cure your whatever. But according to FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, nothing can say can cure anything unless it's been proven by the FDA. So the businesses may never say any of that, but they put their people at risk when they say that, because they can now get in trouble legally for saying something cures something when there's no verifiable evidence for it. And all the company says, well, we don't tell them we did it. We don't tell them to do it. They did it on their own. So these companies aren't really desiring in any way to look after their own employees to protect them from the government. They'll just, kind of just like, well, that's your fault. You did it. You're wrong. You should have known, instead of providing the proper training on how to interact in that way. And I think that leads into, again, that positive power thinking, in that it's your fault, if something goes wrong.
Just like it's your fault if you're not healed, right? I think one thing I wanted to offer, which is a quick thought, okay? And this is, well, some people might call it a conspiracy theory, but if you look at the presidents, okay, when Obama was president, a lot of people felt like he was Muslim, right? Because he shared a lot of the same seemingly similar religious tenets, right? But what they got wrong was that he wasn't. He believed in Black liberation theology, which of course comes from James Cone, which merged Malcolm X's Muslim ideas, right? Islamic ideas, should I say, and Martin Luther King's socialist ideas, socialist Marxist ideas, merged those two together and created what we know as Black liberation theology today. Now you have, during his presidency, more racial tendencies being proposed at that time, right? And causing more racial issues. And then, of course, stirring up what was typically, unfortunately, the more poor populations, which is the quote unquote minority. You can't even really use the term anymore because there's Blacks and Hispanics more than there was back in America back in the day. But using that as a term to understand the demographic, more Blacks and Hispanics, you stirred them up more, right? In that sense, politically and economically. And then he leaves presidency. And now you have the complete opposite. Now you have Trump, which also has ties into some of the multi-level marketing because he knows Peel, right? The guy that you mentioned earlier.
He went to at least his family went to his church.
His family, right, when it's collegiate. And from my understanding and some of the research that I've done, he's familiar with Peel. He's praised Peel before, in a lot of his work. And of course, guess who did President Trump's invocation during his presidency? Everybody remember? Paula White, right? Word faith preacher, prosperity gospel, anybody seeing a connection. So when you have ideas like Trump, which isn't Christian, he's not evangelical in the sense of what we would define it, quote unquote, however way you define Big Eva, as Mikey likes to call it off since Phil Johnson said that. When we talk about actual gospel-centered ideas, Trump doesn't follow that. He would follow the ideas behind New Thought metaphysics or anything that's going to cause money level marketing success and that kind of thing, right? So we got to understand some of this stuff is connected. It's not a coincidence and it's not a conspiracy. You understand where these presidents came from, how they grew up, who they're associated with, who are their colleagues. It's not much to think that now you have on the opposite side, quote unquote, the white nationalism that's being stirred up. And then the social gospel is being introduced into churches as well. That goes against this quote unquote white nationalism and rich people, causing an even further divide between quote unquote rich and poor, and then creating even more issues that you see today. To me, it's not a coincidence that a lot of these people who believe these things are in the places that they are. Not because there's some kind of quote unquote collusion between all of them, but because ideas have consequences and belief has consequences. And if you get enough people believing a certain thing, you can get the kind of consequences you're looking for depending on whether you're on one side or the other. Obviously, the big conspiracy is that we know that the prince and power of the air controls the minds of those who do not believe. That's the bigger conspiracy. On the latter side, on the bottom side, we know not everybody's calling each other saying, hey, let's figure out how we can make this nation, cut itself in half. But all these ideas that people are aligned with from one side to the other has consequences. And unfortunately, once again, this big knot, what's the only thing that's going to cut right through it? The gospel.
Yeah. And that's about all our time for tonight. So we
was that on time?
Yeah, we are out of time. We are
That was a
coming to
good
the end of the
episode,
program.
George.
Yeah. So we
Like a
had
plane.
we had a pretty decent program talking about MLMs tonight. Mike, you and your wife there, she is our guest, so maybe you two would want to close us out tonight before we end the program.
Do you want to? You haven't talked much. I've talked a lot.
Oh, I feel like I talk enough. I guess my last warning to listeners would be there are a lot of Christian MLMs, and you still need to be careful, even if they encourage you to read your Bible and go to church. That would be my caution.
Yeah, I like that.
And there's other things too, that we just haven't had time to address. Like MLMs provide community, and they're really good at providing community with it, and that you shouldn't mistake your community you build with the company, if you choose to do it, with the church. That you still need to build community within the church. You need the local body. It is God's means of grace to you to hear the word preached, to fellowship with your fellow believers with it. And so just, there's caution. Just go in it knowing there's a lot of cautions, and that, I would say if counseling someone, asking someone, I would probably steer them away from it. I think the cautions are real and hard enough that it is not worth the time to get involved. That, like Vegas, where the house always wins, in MLMs, the company's going to win. And that is how it is.
All right, so that's been the program tonight. If you have any comments about the program, email us at g220radio@gmail.com. Again, that's g220radio@gmail.com. I've seen a lot of people tuning in on Facebook and even on YouTube there. So if you have a comment, email us. We'd love to hear your feedback. Until next week, remember, it's the 400th episode of G220 Radio. And as George says,
until we go home.
I don't even know if this is going to stop.
How long do I have to fake smile?